for research here in the College of Public Health. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to a really interesting and exciting panel that we've got for you today. We are going to be welcoming, just by way of introduction, a distinguished lecturer coming up Thursday, October the 6th. That is an event that you do not want to miss. The title of the talk is Zika, Mosquitoes, and Public Health, Learning History Again. A little repetitive phrasing, but I think it's intentional. And the presenter is Dr. Courtney Brown, who directs the UK Public Health Entomology Laboratory. So he's really going to be talking about some very timely and interesting issues. So please, October 6th, save it on your calendar. There is a lunch and learn that was scheduled for September the 29th on improving post-award processes. We're going to postpone that for a month until we have those post-award processes more firmly. So look for that to take place on October 27th. That's our new date, and by then we will have those post-award processes in place and you'll feel secure about them. So today our presentation is about mentored research, and it's so extremely important. I can look around and tell that there are a lot of students in the audience here. This will be an opportunity for you all to learn how amazing partnerships between faculty members and their mentees actually get done. The talks that you're going to hear today, or the questions that will be answered today, are provided by people who have received small grants. The mentees have received small grants through the mentor support. And there are some fine mentors here who have worked with the students to make this happen. So we're going to hear today from April Young, who is working with Algarin. Is that what you say?
That's probably the correct way, but he just says Angel.
Angel, okay. He is an PhD student in epidemiology, and they are looking at doing a project that is called Utilizing MSM Geosocial Networking Applications for HIV Research in Rural Areas. We'll also hear from Courtney Blondino and her mentor, Sabrina Brown. They're doing a project entitled Thematic Analyses and Interpretation of Homicide-Suicide Narratives of the National Violent Death Reporting System. Also, Courtney Brown, who has been working with Richard Kryscio on a colon cancer screening project. And finally, we'll be hearing from Nathaniel Wilson, who is a BPH student, an undergraduate. See, it can start early, an undergraduate, and he is working with Kristen, who is one of the affiliates in Health Behavior and Society. They are working on a project entitled the Sexual Desire Psychometric Pilot Study. So what we've got here are some questions that have been asked to the research mentors and their mentees, and we'll just launch right into the questions and get some feedback from our panel here. So, do you want to start?
I'm happy to start. Should we all address a question, go down the line, or should I address everything at once?
Let's just address one at a time. How about that?
So the first question Dr. Schoenberg gave us was, can you briefly describe the specific research project that you and your student initiated as part of the just-in-time CPH funding? So Angel and I worked on a project in Lexington focused on MSM, men who have sex with men, and their sexual risk behavior. And to give you some background, it's really difficult to recruit men who have sex with men. I'm learning that, especially now in another study. It's also really difficult to understand what's going on with their sexual risk behavior and how that overlaps with their use of social networking apps. So for example, you know probably about Tinder. There are analogous apps that are being used by MSM, such as Grindr, Manhunt, Adam for Adam. I could go on and on. And those apps are geolocation apps in that they can find people near them who are also searching for a partner. These apps have been demonized in the literature, in public health literature, as promoting risk behavior. And in some cases they do, but in some cases they don't. They're just like any other dating app. So our goal was to use these apps to collect information about where in Lexington people were seeking partners, MSM specifically, and use that so that we can better geo-target intervention. So Angel repeated a study like this in Moorhead, and what he did was he mapped out 102 miles of roads in Moorhead, which is about an hour and a half east of here, a rural county, Brown County. And he mapped those out, and he drove down the road, stopping every 2 miles, logging into 3 different dating apps, Hornet, Adam for Adam, and Growler. And he would log in and count the number of people within a 1 mile radius of him. And we did not collect any identifying information or, record any of the characteristics of the people on the apps, but we just counted the people within the radius of where he had stopped. And so he went on and did this for 102 miles. He did it at daytime hours during the work week, and then he repeated it at weekend hours, 8 to midnight on Fridays and Saturday nights, to see how the distribution of partners seeking MSM changed over time and over space. In Lexington, this was really successful, and we learned a lot about the distribution of MSM. In Rowan County, half of the points did not have cell service, so that presented a major challenge. It turns out half of the points were in the national forest. But on the other points, we did find that people were using drastically different apps in Brown County than they were in Lexington, and that there was some spatial concentrations, and they're seeking to spatially analyze that. I'm looking at Jay for help, to analyze that clustering this month and next month. So very interesting, very important for public health practice and sexual health among MSM, so that we can target interventions a bit better.
Where is he then?
Where is he? He's in the National Forest searching for MSM. He is, I think he's in class right now, so he's trusted me to explain his baby, this project, so hopefully I do it justice.
Yes, I feel the same way. So I'm working with Courtney Blondino, who's an MPH student in epidemiology, and she sought me out because of the nature of my research activities. So specifically, she started looking at murder-suicides, homicides followed by suicide, and suicide needs to occur within a 24-hour period, and began to look at narratives from death scene investigators, coroners, medical examiners, and law enforcement. And it's qualitative. It's a qualitative study, so she began to, we're in process still together. And she's also looking at the national data, not just Kentucky. So we pulled from all of the national violent death reporting system states, which I think it was 32, I believe, yeah, 32 at the time of the extraction. And it's 10 years of data. So she's looking at thousands of cases and started to read through the narratives and pick up themes. And then from that, we consider that it's just aggregate case, looking at that level. That's the baseline. And from the baseline, then developed questions, and then it becomes overwhelming, right? Then developed a coding schema, a more detailed look at these overarching themes in the data. And from there, that's kind of where we are right now, and we determined to stop at, I think it's 1,032 cases, and look to make sure it was a random sample, but we're going to use it as a sample at this point, just because it is overwhelming to read through that many case descriptions. And now we're trying to fine-tune and focus what we're exactly going to look at. Homicide-suicides alone, homicide-suicides versus multiple homicides. We're kind of looking at what the coding that Courtney's done at this point to determine where we're going to focus from here on out. And then from here, in the future, then we will kind of go back to the major themes and find 4 to 6 major themes that we will then place our more descriptive analysis underneath those major themes. And then, of course, being an epidemiology student, she'll need to do some analytical analysis after that. That's kind of where we're at right now, and then our goals and objectives are, of course, to present at a national meeting and then develop at least one manuscript, which I believe, using the national data, that she's on the right track to be able to publish from this data.
Great. So Nate was already working in the sexual health promotion lab where I'm the director, and so he found this funding opportunity and then came to me with it and said, could I work maybe more closely on one of the projects that you have going on by applying for this funding mechanism. And so that was really good timing, actually, at that time, because we were just about to launch the second phase of a study where we're developing we're developing a scale to measure sexual desire in a different way than it's previously been measured. So previously, sexual desire has always been thought of as sort of a trait, or measured like a trait, when really we know that desire ebbs and flows, both on an individual level and within a couple. And so we wanted to create an event level measure that allowed us to examine sexual desire on that event level. And this is particularly timely because if any of you heard about the pink Viagra, it's a pill called flubanserin that was recently approved by the FDA after its third attempt. It's quite a contentious pill approval, and there's the measurement tools that we're using in order to assess the efficacy of this pill are really, I would argue, poor. But so in conjunction with creating this new scale, we are also doing a psychometric comparison of all of the existing sexual desire scales in order to see which ones are functioning the best in measuring these sexual desire outcomes, particularly in women, although we're collecting data from women and men. And so we're just about to, Nate came with me to Sweden this summer. Well, he came with me to Amsterdam to a study abroad experience, and then we went directly to Sweden. And we presented this at the International Academy of Sex Research, which is a very prestigious conference in our field. And we talked about the initial stages of this scale development. Learned a few lessons while we were there in how to maybe tweak going forward, and so that was great. And we're just about to, we just sent out actually to the rest of the lab or Nate just sent out this morning to the rest of the lab the scale to take the third phase of the survey online to make sure that it's ready to launch. So we're about to launch this third phase, and hopefully from that we can come up with a more psychometrically sound tool, and also something that allows us to examine desire on this daily level, looking at not just desire as this spontaneous feeling, but also as responsive to our various cues around us. So it's an ongoing project, but it's certainly been a huge help to have Nate more dedicated to one particular project. Yeah.
I'm Courtney Blondino. I'm an MPH student with a concentration in biostatistics. My project is a program evaluation of a colon cancer screening program at Kentucky Cancer Link, which is a nonprofit organization here in Lexington. I became affiliated with them in 2015 as the site for my undergraduate, so yay, PPH students. I was an undergrad at Eastern, and we were required to do 350 hours of field practical work. So I needed a site where it was going to work out for a nice extended period of time. I worked with them in 2015 on their colon cancer screening program. Loved the people, loved the project. I have a passion for cancer research. Everyone in my family dies of cancer or freak accident. Those are your choices. And I keep surviving the freak accidents, so I figured I really need to get into colon cancer research. The project is looking at comparing not only high-risk groups, although everyone in Kentucky is considered a high-risk group, but a subset of the population in the African-American community. We're looking at comparing a pilot project that we did with a church using diffusion of innovations theory to try to increase participation and completion of the colon cancer screening program. And I'm about to launch my big piece of the research, which will be at Consolidated Baptist Church, going in and working with linking agents within the church who will help to communicate and educate the population on why it's important to complete their project, prompt them to turn in their samples, and make sure that everybody gets all the way through with guidance and education. And what we're hoping to see is that the linking agent who looks like, acts like, speaks like, and is a member of the target population will be more effective at encouraging people to complete their participation. I'm hoping to get some nice data analysis as I'll be doing secondary data analysis from their data and looking at a larger view as well of the general population and hoping to get at least one research paper out of it.
Thank you all. And let me just say that when our committee was reviewing these applications, they were excellent, and we provided feedback to all of the applicants. And I remember just being so impressed by Candy and Dick's proposal, because this is so, for a master's degree, it is a lot of work, what Candy had proposed to do. So this is incredibly impressive, as well as, all of the other projects that have been presented here. So April, do you want to launch into the second question?
Sure, so the second question is, what steps did your student take to identify you, and how did those collaborations start? Angel is a Lyman T. Johnson Fellow, and as part of that fellowship, he is supposed to be engaged in research. And so Scott McIntosh, who works with our students closely when they come into the college, knew about my research. He and I had communicated about it quite a bit, and I told him I was interested in having a student work with me. And when Angel came in and expressed interest in HIV research and sexual health research, Scott immediately paired us together. And so as part of Angel's Lyman T. Johnson Fellowship, he'll be working with me for 2 years. And that is on a CCTS funded project. And then Angel took the initiative to pursue this just-in-time funding as sort of a spur off of our broader project.
I'm going to refrain from jumping to question 3 about what skills Courtney has, but Courtney came to me and she was interested. She'd already been exposed to a violent event or had been to a college where there was a college shooting, am I getting that right? So she'd been exposed to some violence in this manner and was compelled to research it, and that's what we do, right? Our histories lead us to a lot of times to research activities. And she came to me, and what struck me about Courtney is she already had an idea in mind of what she wanted to do. She had read up on my research activities, she had read up on the National Violent Death Reporting System, identified a data source that she wanted to learn more about, offered to work voluntarily, and had a schedule in mind, and she just came prepared with a plan in place, so it was easy to say yes, and just very eager about the subject matter. So she approached me, bottom line is because of the content of my research.
I was teaching CPH 203, and Nate was in that class, which is the sexual health class in public health. And so Nate approached me after that because I mentioned that I run the lab. I'm actually in kinesiology and health promotion, but I'm a secondary faculty in health behavior. So he had approached me saying he was interested in research. I also have a background in biostatistics, of which Nate has a lot of interest. So he was part of the lab, and always, at our lab meetings, I'm always telling students, look for grant opportunities. Nate's probably the only student who's actually come to me with a lot of different grant opportunities, too many for me to be able to pursue. But this one was, he really just took the initiative, and that's how the collaboration started with this one. We talked about what different projects would be best for this, particularly given the timelines on each of the projects and the timeline of the grant, to make sure that we were, meeting the requirements of both. But that's how that started, and we still collaborate.
My collaboration is really a team effort, and I appreciate that. I came to Dr. Kryscio with my project idea on our very first day of orientation, when we were all sitting in that big room, and they said, how many are you in PH? So the very first day I met Dr. Kryscio, I said, this is what I did as an undergrad, and I'm interested in continuing this research. He was incredibly supportive, and has been so supportive throughout this entire project. My committee is fantastic. Based on his recommendation and from others, I requested Dr. Vanderpool and Dr. Wong, who are both involved in cancer research. Dr. Angie Carmen was one of my instructors, loved working with her, and found out she also has a passion for diffusion of innovations and program evaluation. So that put together just an amazing team. I've been working with Dr. Tom Collins at the Regional Cancer Prevention Center. He's been a wealth of information. Margaret McGladry, I can't, there's more people that I can list, Deborah Bailey. Just so many people have helped me at each step of the process in putting together whatever I needed and to make sure that my ideas were sound. So I really appreciate that.
So a theme that I hear common to these individuals is that the student approached them. So they were not soliciting students willy-nilly. The student was proactive, the student was prepared. He or she had very good ideas, maybe had done some research ahead of time to see what was out there, what was innovative, maybe even looked for opportunities to be funded to do this project. And those are all winning elements in why a faculty member is going to want to work with you.
So the third question on the list, Dr. Schoenberg kind of just answered this, but what compelled you to collaborate with a student, and or what skills did they have that made them a viable candidate for collaboration on this grant? A lot of the skills that they've already mentioned, Angel brought to the table. I think I would add to that enthusiasm and the broader purpose for the study. I feel like he's really committed to addressing health disparities that affect LGBTQ populations and reducing the burden of HIV, especially in rural areas. And his enthusiasm for that broader mission made me want to work with him and actually increase my enthusiasm about the project as well. And so in addition to all of the things they've mentioned, Angel brought that to the table. Also, the ability to problem solve. He would encounter challenges, and rather than coming to me to ask for coaching about how to address them, he would address them himself, unless it was just insurmountable. And I really appreciated that because of the time constraints faculty are under.
I'm going to make sure I hit all these because it's very specific. And when I wrote the letter of support for this grant, well, let me go back. So Courtney was working voluntarily, reading narratives on her own time. She already had an assistantship, she's trying to support herself, going to school. So when the just-in-time grants came out, I suggested, hey, let's write this. I'm ready to invest more time into you. And the thing that struck me the most was that you don't need grant writing experience. That's not contingent upon the just-in-time grants. It's characteristics of the student. So Courtney, first of all, took constructive criticism very well. That's key. Like, you have to be able to receive comments without being defensive and absorb. And then also, what's really important is she incorporated all of the edits and all of the all of the strategies that I suggested. And so the second draft incorporated everything. She didn't miss anything. And then it gone, and between one draft and the other, night and day. So it's, when you have a student that's excited, passionate, motivated, it moves pretty quickly into some really great material. And then also, I trust that Courtney's going to complete the tasks that she set out, that she's outlined. And even beyond and we put this in the grant application, even when the funding expires, we will continue and meet all of the objectives that we laid out. And I believe that she's going to follow through. Probably more. I need to bring her back a little bit. Let's just focus on this right now, actually. That's beyond, that's doctoral work, Courtney. Let's stay to master's here. And that's all. I just wanted to make sure I incorporated.
And with Nate, he was just very motivated to get involved, and almost to the point where I was always feeling like I didn't have enough to give him, because again, with the follow through on getting things done, especially for an undergraduate student, his motivation to learn, and he learned SPSS when we were working on a different project, and just wanted to learn. And so I think that's a really good quality to have, especially when it's paired with competence and being able to actually follow through. So that's made it an easy decision.
I won't speak for Dr. Kryscio and what made you valuable candidate. I will tell you what I think helped me persevere. I applied for 3 different funding sources, and the documentation can feel overwhelming. So I would echo what they have said. Being proactive, go get answers, experience. Many of the grant applications asked what background did I have in this area. So if you're looking for a topic, look at areas where you already have some experience, even if it's in your family. As I said, I have a long family history of cancer. That was a factor that I presented as part of my background. Admitting what you don't know. If you have a question on the application for a grant that says, how are you gonna do this? Say, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. I'll put together a team, I'll figure it out. Adapting to change, oh my gosh, please don't take it personally. The first batch of edits on my IRB application and on the just-in-time, you know, oh, we would like it in this format, you wrote it in that format. Okay, well, I didn't know, so now I learned. And every grant application wanted a slightly different format. So it was a real education process. Get your application in early so that you have time to incorporate all of those edits and still make the deadline. Being able to communicate, both verbally, to walk up to an advisor and say, hey, I'm interested in this project, will you help me? And writing skills. If you have challenges with writing skills, we have writing labs, we have all kinds of resources for you to get help. Online tools to help you revise your writing. Being able to clearly communicate exactly what you mean is very helpful.
So what I hear them saying here is maybe the emphasis is less on technical skills, so don't feel necessarily deterred if you don't have a very strong background in grantsmanship or, say, biostatistics. That's why you're in school. But more personality attributes, ability to take constructive criticism, ability to just keep on going with things and persist. Those are really, really important attributes. And so don't be put off by the fact that you have not had years of programming experience or other things.
For the fourth question, how did the student and or mentor grow as a result of the experience? I'll first talk, I think, about how I saw Angel grow through the process. He may say something differently, but hey, he's not here, so I can say whatever I want. It changed his life. I think that this was Angel's first time writing a grant, and the process of writing a grant is very different than writing a term paper. It's a much more argumentative style. You're having to convince someone to give you money and trust you. And I saw Angel's writing grow as a result of just putting this grant application together. Not just the grant application, but the budget. You know, right now, or before this experience, he had been involved as a research assistant on the project and had no idea what goes on in the background in terms of budgeting. And for the first time, he actually had to budget for his own project. And he realized that money, it doesn't go very far. And I thought that was a great learning experience for him moving forward, especially because he's interested in PhD programs, and this is something he'll have to do. I also felt like he began to articulate his interests more clearly and articulate what he had done as part of the project more clearly. He presented at the CCPS conference in a poster presentation and won an award. He's also presenting at the state's HIV conference. And he applied to present at APHA. Unfortunately, it wasn't accepted, but the process of putting together that abstract was a good one. And he is trying to present also at Infectious Research Day that's coming up next month. So those barriers and hesitancies he had about public speaking about the project, I saw those slowly fade away as he became more confident. And I think that might not have happened without this sort of experience. For myself, I had mentored students in the past, but not on something that was so independent. And I grew in terms of learning how to trust the student to do the work without intervening. I also saw the writing on the wall in terms of not having self-service before half the data points. And I had to kind of stop myself from stepping in because I felt like he would learn from mistakes and he would learn from design issues and things that he could do better. And by letting him just go for it and make mistakes, that's how I learned. And I felt like that would be a good experience for him, but that was tough for me, and the first time I've really been pretty hands-off. So there's tons of other things I've learned as a result of the experience, but that one really stands out.
I echo a lot of what April said too. But what was remarkable to me and inspiring to me was to watch Courtney's research, like the researcher come out, and that to kind of develop. So Courtney did a practicum at the Virginia, it was the medical examiner office, which is where their National Violent Death Reporting System project is housed. We're housed at the university, they're housed at the medical examiner office. So that's where she did her practicum. So I don't know which was a springboard to which, but I think that was first and this was second. But I loved how the two things meshed. So what happened in her mind with this project, she was thinking about the project while she was doing this practicum, and she started to look into the methodology, like back to where the data is collected, the death scene investigation and investigators, how they're collecting the information and what that means at the end. So she wasn't just looking at this flat file of data, she was looking at how this data was collected and how different it was between Virginia and Kentucky. So a whole other project spawned from this initial project, and that was a methodological approach to how the information is collected. So we're going to actually, and that's where I then began to encourage Courtney to maybe think about doctoral work, because the way she's thinking is starting to become innovative enough that this is doctoral. And so we've talked a little bit about that in addition to this. So we've had a lot of great conversations, but kind of going in two directions now, doing this thematic analysis, and then let's look at the disparities between the two states and compare and contrast how death scene information is being collected. So that was pretty exciting to watch that process unfold with her. And then I just want to leave you, I'm going to quote you, Courtney, in your from your application, or the progress report. And that's another thing that was really exciting to share with a student, because we kind of work on grants in isolation as faculty, I feel like. And no one really, we can't teach that to students. And this was a really great opportunity to work together from beginning through the process and to the end. And the process is deliverables. You always have grant deliverables. Progress reports, how are you doing? Budget updates, am I coming through with the way that I anticipated my budget would be? So that's been exciting. And this is right from one of her progress reports. This grant has provided me the opportunity to spend more time dedicated to the thematic analysis and further interpretation of this project. In supplementation with my practicum experience, I believe that this project will produce very innovative ideas and concepts involving violent death reporting and prevention. I think that says a lot.
Well, Nate's here, so I'm going to ask him what he feels like he learned from our collaboration, and then I can talk about what I learned.
Yeah. So I never had done research before in the past. I didn't really know what to expect from it or anything. So I started off, I kind of learned a little bit of SPS in my analytics course, and that was kind of cool to be able to work in that. And so I met Dr. Martin. We talked about our project. And I was already working as a peer-health educator at Universal Health Service, and I worked for sexual health there. So it kind of all tied together when I went and started this research with her, so I can now expand my knowledge of what I already had, like kind of baseline, and kind of expand quite a bit into that and learn more about the department in the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what did you think of the international conference?
That was actually really interesting. There were a lot of big names that I quoted them in some of my papers in school, so it's kind of cool to put a face to the people that I had citations for. And it was really interesting.
Yeah. And that conference too that you went, I mean, that's a pretty cutthroat conference. It wasn't, it's not a very student-friendly conference. So, and you got to see that firsthand. For me, I really, particularly, I've mentored lots of graduate students in the past, but undergraduate students, Nate was like the second undergraduate student that I've worked with in a real research mentorship capacity. And so learning what tasks are, when I should step back and have more independence for the student versus be more hands-on was a difficult balance at first for me. I think I'm still working through it and still trying to figure out how exactly, sort of what tasks I can just sort of send you with, and then what things I should be a little bit more hands-on with. And so really I think my growth was in being able to manage mentorship of an undergraduate student when it comes to research. Luckily with Nate, he had already been volunteering in the lab, and so we knew how to work together at the beginning of this grant, and he really took the initiative in putting the grant together. So I think that allowed me to see that undergraduate students really can play a large role in making things like this move forward. And I think that's a big lesson learned for me, to trust that and let them go forth.
For me, some of you who've met me may not believe this, but I'm actually very shy. It is difficult for me to ask for help. I like to work on a project by myself. I've not had good experiences in the past working on teams. Some of you may have experienced this, that 80-20, 20% of the people do 80% of the work. So it was a real challenge for me to work as more of a team concept, both with my partner organization and with my capstone committee. So I think from that, I've definitely have an increased willingness to ask for help, because I found such an amazingly supportive environment where I get a great response when I ask for help. So that makes it so much easier, and thank you all for that. I've had a positive team experience. I also, from a technical perspective, learned how to break my project into its discernible components. Like you said, getting the full scope of it. It's shocking when you are boots on the ground and you're working in something, but when you have to actually define, how are you going to manage your data? How are you going to, encrypt it? How are you going to protect it? What are the policies in place? Oh my gosh, it became a much larger animal than I expected. And definitely increased my ability to accept criticism, even though this is my baby, to accept criticism and say, this is for my benefit, this is my learning opportunity, and I think I've grown a lot from that. And I won't speak for Dr. Kryscio about what he's learned about dealing with me.
Well, I would just say that, by and large, our capstone projects are really consulting projects in biostatistics, and it's more or less we line up the projects for the students. There isn't a lot of student initiative. And it was amazing that I went to this MPA session I go every year, and I had not only Candy, but another student from dentistry who basically were sitting there not asking me questions about the curriculum, which, they asked a few questions, but they were primarily interested from day one in the projects they were working on. So, I thought that was just an amazing thing, because I had, I think, like 19 doctoral students in statistics, and most of the time it's you're handing them problems, and it's not a whole lot of initiative.
Those are great insights. So what I have gleaned from this is that for the students, you've seen their growth as researchers, both methodologically and their willingness to sort of take the next step, an increase in self-confidence, for example, a desire to move on, perhaps to even move on to a PhD or do more research in general. Their growth in being part of a team. Academics tends no longer to be a you're on your own type thing. You tend to work with teams, and sometimes that's hard to accept if you have a lot of confidence in yourself and maybe lack of confidence in other people, or are just used to working on your own. And just a more or less growth in autonomy. Also, from the faculty's perspective, we don't take classes in how to be a good mentor. That's not something that we, have in our curriculum, just like you don't have that. Usually you become a good mentor because you've been mentored well. And that is the way that you tend to grow as a mentor. And you also grow when you have opportunities to team up with great students who will lead you to be great mentors. So I can see that that's definitely something that our panels talked about. Respect for student autonomy, especially when you've got students who are as sterling as the students whose work is represented today, and their management of the whole arrangement has been a growth opportunity for faculty.
Okay. The other question is, what should other students consider as they are trying to forge collaborations with faculty? I think you've already heard some of this, but the first conversation, that first interaction you have with a faculty member when you're expressing your interest in research is critical. It's not the place to do soul searching in their office in that first meeting. The place to do the soul searching is far before that. And you should really define specific, it doesn't have to be a specific project, but at least a specific area that interests you. and have taken inventory of what skills you can bring to the table and what skills you need to develop. And the other thing I think that is important is before you go and talk to a faculty member, read a few of their papers, look on NIH Reporter and see what they're doing right now in terms of funded research. Know something about their research portfolio before you go and talk to them, and already be thinking, how can I fit into this puzzle? I would also suggest that you start out with volunteer experience. I think many of these started out as a volunteer experience, and that shows a lot. That shows your commitment and your interest in research, and it also gives you a chance to build your skill set and what you can bring to the table once it is a funded position.
Absolutely, and when you come prepared, also not having all the answers necessarily, but having an idea and a passion for the area of research. And I'm going to let you comment, so prepare a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like Dr. Brown said, I have a passion coming from where I went to do my undergrad. And I didn't really realize how much it resonated with me until I started to understand. I think it was orientation. And you're like, people call me Dr. Jeff, and I was like, oh, that's cool. What is that? And so, and because my main focus was in infectious disease, that was my interest. But then when I thought about that more, I was like, wait, I can do something with this. And so I did some research and decided, like, let me see where I can take this. And from what you said in your previous response about my practicum experience, I wanted to do research just to, I guess, expand my toolbox of what I was capable of doing. But after seeing this kind of work in an applied setting in a Department of Health and medical examiner's office, I started to realize how much we depend on research and how much it plays a role in everyday work. And I think that's when I started to consider, maybe I do like this stuff. Like maybe it's, you know, I don't know. But I think that's where I've kind of transitioned, especially in this. But yeah, knowing a little bit about what you're interested in, but like you said, not knowing all the answers. Because I've emailed Sabrina saying, well, what about this? What do you think about this? Tell me your experience on this, and how can we mold this to produce something great? So.
And I love how Courtney has a lot of ideas, and she's really excited. And part of my job has been, let's hone in. Like, so we had a lot to work with, you know. So let's hone in. Let's try to focus. So right now, that's what we're doing. We're trying to focus on a hypothesis and move in that direction. And I think all of us have alluded to this too. We have a lot of students coming and going in our offices. And okay, research. I did research on this. No, you did a Google search on the internet. There's a distinction. And come back to me in a couple of weeks when you have done some research, or come, you know, initially, and it's building trust. Okay, you're not just going to do a Google search on the internet. You're going to be invested in this, because if I'm going to invest in a student, I need them to come through with milestones and deliverables. And definitely, Courtney has earned my trust and has gone above and beyond my expectations and what the grant has outlined. So trust is a big issue with students.
Yeah, I think also, particularly if you're approaching more junior faculty, although you may have your own idea of what you want to research, being able to be open to jumping onto some of their ongoing projects. Because as junior faculty, you know, you need to make sure that your projects are getting out the door and that you're really paying attention to your main priorities. And so to have students willing to work on those projects and put the time in on those projects before they perhaps start their own or really are able to answer their own research questions is really valuable. And makes it easier for junior faculty to mentor students while still making sure that their own research is tended to.
The best advice I can give you is start early. I mean, I started like the first day I sat on this campus, but the guts of it, of actually digging in and starting, for example, I started writing my IRB application in December of 2016. I work, I help my daughter raise my grandkids, I'm a student, I'm also a teacher, I have a lot of irons in the fire, and you guys do too. So I started writing in December. I did my first IRB application in April. comments came back, another revision, a few more comments, one more revision. I was approved in August. So, yes! That's huge, I'm so excited. But I thought when I started this, I'd be able to work in March, which is Colon Cancer Prevention Month. So that was my goal, was to hit that target. And it didn't happen. So having plenty of ramp-up time for all of this research and digging and writing and learning is critical to having a really good project. I did choose a large, complicated one, but I'm fully confident that I could do it, but I sure didn't understand the scope of it when I started. So I did have several people on my committee look at me. Dr. Wong particularly said, "You're nuts." Absolutely said to me, "You are crazy." And I said, "Okay, what's next?" I'm fine with that, I'm crazy. So what's next? How do we do this? And I didn't let that deter me. And so now it's actually coming together, and I'm actually really ready to dig in and do what I wanted to do. But it has taken a lot longer than I anticipated. So start early.
It's good advice, because this particular mechanism is a fast one. I mean, we turn things around within usually 2 weeks. If you apply it externally, that might take 6 months or 8 months, or longer. Yeah, you could have babies by the time, you're finished. So be aware, I think that Candy's right, it takes a lot of startup time and things, especially if you're doing, whatever you're doing, research doesn't proceed seamlessly and without delays, that's for sure. So I also heard our presenters talk about being prepared, going into offices, knowing what the faculty member does research-wise, having read some of his or her publications, speaking knowledgeably about that, knowing what they don't do, and making sure that that's not what you're going in there asking to do with them. Making certain that you are aware of what skills you can bring to the table. That can be very helpful. And what skills that you intend to build to contribute as a team member. That also is important. Volunteer, I heard this maybe 2 or 3 times. Volunteering is an extremely important component. I know that we've had students who have done just that, and they show that they're excellent. And so you want to hire them if there's an opportunity. They've shown that they're willing to do it, and they're willing to do it for free. So when you have an opportunity to pay them, you tend to really want to do them that, or say send them on a trip. I'm looking at Brent because he's going on a trip because he's superb and he's on one of our projects, and we can afford to send him to EPJ. So that's terrific. Knowing that that you don't know all the answers, but being willing to learn is another component in what makes a good student experience. Respect for faculty's time, so doing all that work ahead of time. Those are some things. I think do we have another question?
We have 2 more, but we can combine them, I think.
Okay, let's combine and then spend 5 minutes just opening it up.
Sure. So the 2 questions are, one, what are the challenges that you confront in these sorts of collaborations? What recommendations do you have to minimize those? And the other question is, what are some best practices? So I think we can combine those 2. One thing that is difficult is time. The student having time in their schedule to meaningfully contribute to a project, and the faculty member having time to commit to mentoring that student. I think on the student side, it's helpful if you treat it as a class. So you carve out time every week in your schedule to commit to that specific project. Otherwise, it gets lost in the shuffle. From the faculty member's point of view, I think setting up a meeting with a student at least once a week to check in on them, see how things are going, maybe once every 2 weeks once they become more independent, and carving out time in your schedule for that sort of interaction is really important. Another challenge is matching the needs you have as a faculty member with the skills the student already has. And the hard part is judging what skills they already have, but sometimes they don't know what skills they don't have, and they do have. And so a lot of people approach me interested in getting involved in research, and I constantly was doing this inventory of what can they bring to the table. So to speed that process up, I developed a survey on Google, like Google Docs or whatever it is, And when a student contacts me and says, I would like to meet, and I'm interested in working with you, I send them that survey, I say, just fill this out. And it asks about what software programs they're familiar with, what they've done, what they've written, in what capacity, was it for a class, was it independently, and it allows me to gauge their level of preparedness and how I can match them with a part of my project. I've also found that students struggle with literature reviews. They sort of go down the rabbit hole when you ask them to read a lot of information. And so I've started using a database approach to literature reviews, where I give them an Excel sheet with some very simple columns like, author, year, method, sample size, location, strengths, weaknesses, where it's very, very structured. And that way, when they're reading the literature, they're filling out that table. And it's easy for me to see what they've read, and it's easy for them to communicate it back to me, and it cuts out a lot of the time at the beginning of the project. So those are the actionable things I would recommend.
I keep having a really good answer in my mind, and then I get into listening to April, and I forget what I want to say because it's so good. The biggest thing that I want to relay to all of you is not to be constrained by the budget. This is an investment in future. This is an investment in a curriculum vitae and experience. Think of it beyond punching the clock. It's not a job. A experience to go to the APHA or another conference, whether it be locally or nationally or internationally, that in and of itself is a payment. But it's an investment, so don't get stuck within the budget. It's going to spill over before, and it's going to spill over after the funding period. And I think we did a good job with Courtney of articulating that we were going to continue even beyond the funding, that it was an important, and it's important for this project too, what her insight that she's bringing in and her growth as a researcher, that has been an improvement to the project. So we're going to continue, it's going to spill over after.
Yeah, I would echo what both of you have said. I think those are all great challenges and solutions to those that I've encountered as well. Also, I think that I've started to create sort of project teams in my lab that have helped a little bit by having graduate students mentor the undergraduate students a little bit more, and it allows for graduate students to then get mentorship experience, and also allows me to take away a little bit more of because I like to have control of all of it, so it allows me to let go of some of that. And I also think that minimizing challenges related to time is really important. Rather than having meetings, I try to have what we call working meetings, where when a student comes to my office, I'm not meeting with them about a task that both of us should have done prior to that meeting, but instead we meet for an hour and get that task done in that hour, so that it doesn't rely on adding to my to-do list necessarily, but allows for us to work collaboratively in that time period and make it more of an action meeting instead of just an information sharing meeting. So those are a couple of things that I do to try and help with some of those challenges. But I echo what both of you have said as well.
For me, as far as challenges, I think one of them has been what's common knowledge for faculty, and I don't know what's common knowledge for faculty. For example, when I first started talking about research, things like the format for a just-in-time grant application. What format are you expecting, so that when you first see something from me, you recognize it as being professional? When I did formats for other documentation, or knowing that I needed to do an IRB application, just these simple things that you might, as faculty, assume we all know, we may not know. So every time I met with a member of my committee, they shared pieces with me that I didn't know. The unknowns were big for me. But as far as suggestions for students, I would say take a chance. One of the favorite phrases in my house comes from Winnie the Pooh. Don't ever take yourself too seriously. And Winnie the Pooh always says, be brave, little piglet. And I remember that every day when I get nervous about doing something, or I feel intimidated, or I feel overwhelmed. Be brave, little piglet. If little piglet can be brave, I can be brave. Ask people. Don't be intimidated when you're asking an established professor to do a project that is related to their research. You have insights, you bring something to the table that's unique. So learn from them, value their experience, but recognize that you have a unique take as well. And your contribution is important. So don't let that intimidate you. And don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid for setbacks. I've learned so much more from the things that didn't go right in this project than I ever learned from things that did.
Do you have some words of wisdom about overcoming challenges in a research project
Yeah, I
you'd
mean,
like to share?
Well, I guess like if you don't know what you're doing, ask for help, because like, that's one of the big challenges with not ever having to do grants before now. So just getting help when you need it, and then trying to be as independent as you can, and putting on a good product or application whatever you're working on.
And Nate was really good about asking questions, like he just would ask the questions, which is way better for me because I would rather you ask those questions and send me something that is going to be, you know, well done, as opposed to sending me something that you wasted your time on and then I'm gonna have to spend hours editing. So, yeah, it's important to ask those questions.
Courtney, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I have never done my own research project before, so getting into it is intimidating and challenging in itself in that way. And so even basic language, like you were saying, like things that faculty know that you may not know. Sure, we've talked about that in a class, but how do you actually apply it to writing a grant or to using it in an applicable way in your research? And so those have been challenges, and we're about to get into some analysis stuff, and I know I'll hit that too when it comes to challenges there. But I embrace it because I've learned so much more from those than I think I would, like you said, the setbacks and those kinds of things. You have more discussion on those topics, so you learn more about them, and that's been really helpful.
We have a couple of minutes, not many, maybe 3, for any questions that you all have of any of our panelists who are spread across the room. Questions?
I have a question, maybe it's for you though, or for anybody. What are some of the incentives for students? So I know we talked about the just-in-time grants. Also, I assume projects can be used for capstones and things like that, or credit hours. How, can you comment on some of that? How does that actually play out in terms of funding resources, credit hour resources, things like that?
So I'll talk about very quickly the just-in-time grant mechanism. So these are small pools, small pots of money that we held as a competition, that were available as a competition last spring. Very small, and you know what's so remarkable is that people make great use of them. So from these, people will be writing articles for publication, doing presentations, and then possibly doing future grant submissions. Those are competitive applications, but there's a quick turnaround time, and that's our intention, is to get products and get research out there very quickly. So that's available. And then, you know, it very well could be that in addition to capstones, which is, you know, what many of you are doing, there are other benefits, tangible benefits that come from the research collaborations too.
We have independent study credits in my department. I'm not sure if those are in other departments as well, that sometimes students can sign up for. But I think also just the value of having that on your CV is a really valuable piece, especially if you're looking to go into a doctoral program or for faculty positions. I mean, if you're at the doctoral, I don't know what level you're at, but if you're at the doctoral level, you know, getting those publications is really important as well. And the more involved you are in a project, the more likely you are to have your name on some of those publications. So that in and of itself is valuable.
Very specific to my funding. So the National Violent Death Reporting System, a lot of the epidemiologists are moving toward qualitative analysis because the dichotomous variables are kind of gateway, and you have to read the investigative material. You certainly can't code on every possible scenario, so it's this qualitative emphasis up at the national system. This is one of their the projects that have been very successful at the CDC. So another goal would be, and Jacqueline is the research assistant on this grant, to have a long-term goal of an EIS officer officer or working at the CDC to kind of be working on what they're working on up at the national level, so it translates very easily in an application.
We have time for maybe one more question.
Yeah, I just kind of want to hit on like the opposite, because it seems like everyone has great mentor experiences right now, and I know that you can volunteer at the beginning to kind of gauge these characteristics from a personality perspective. But as faculty, how do you deal with someone that probably isn't the best fit? How do you still encourage to build research skills without, you know, making the student feel like they should just like, put it all together? Or do you have experiences like that, or have all your mentorships just been phenomenal?
I've had experiences like that, and I just don't invest as much time. Once I realize that the person either isn't serious about it, or they're not putting in the time, or not necessarily where it's just not a good fit, because I think you can work with personality differences. It's more if somebody's not putting in the time that they had committed to, or they don't provide the outputs, then I just then have to sort of decrease the amount of time that I put into them, is essentially how I've handled that. And then it ends up just fizzling out. Maybe that's not the best approach, but
That's exactly the term I was gonna use, it fizzles out.
fizzles out. Like,
I'm more abrupt. So if I see it's not working, I feel like it's a disservice to the student to sort of, it's like breaking up with someone rather than just like not answering
Maybe this is
the
saying
text
something
and
really
being passive
skills.
aggressive. It's better to just have a meeting with them and I tell the student that this isn't working. Clearly what I have is not matching with your career goals or what effort you're able to contribute right now. And I try to give them some advice about skills they can build and maybe can come back to me once they have those skills or that time. If it's a mismatch in terms of their interest area and mine, I'll give them some suggestions of things they should read. But I'm more abrupt about it because I feel like it's a waste of their time, it's a waste of my time to let it fizzle. So rip the Band-Aid off.
And I'm more the April Young school, I would say. So, and then I try to direct students to maybe a more appropriate, substantively appropriate or methodologically appropriate individual. So people ask me to be on dissertation committees a lot. And you know, sometimes the fit's not there. So I think it's best for the student, honestly, to go seek help elsewhere. Not everybody is going to be interested in research either. But I always say to people, irrespective of your future careers, you should know how to write a grant. It's really important, whether you're going to be writing grants for your job, like we do in research, or whether you are going to be PTSA president and writing grants to fund picnics, or you know, whatever it is, or you know, Humane Society. You're going to, throughout your life, have to write grants. And so it's really important to acquire those skills in a positive environment. Well, I want to thank you all. I want one more plug, and that is for our office. We get a lot of inquiries in the research office in the College of Public Health about collaboration and consultation. And we are constantly working with students and faculty members to do that consulting. So contact me if I can help you in any way to try to get your research interests better defined, or so that I can connect you with one of our incredible assets. And I will also say that Emily Dressler, sitting back here in the purple, she is the chair of the research committee for the college and is doing an excellent job. She too can help you funnel your research interests into productive matters. So let's thank our panelists.